Hey everybody, John Granato from the bench, mornings on ESPN 97.5, AJ Hoffman from the Blitz, afternoons on ESPN 97.5. Let's talk some Texans football. And you got Travis Kelce and you got the Kansas City Chiefs first week, AJ, and Kelce just dominated the entire Texans secondary. There's talk of Lonnie Johnson playing some safety. I know they don't want to give a lot away, but Bill O'Brien has hinted that that's a real possibility. Anthony Weaver as well. Lonnie Johnson just looks like a safety, doesn't he? I mean, he hasn't looked like a cornerback at all. He's a big, strong guy. Is he an answer for Kelce this year?
My guess is no, considering no one's really an answer for Kelce. No one on this roster anyway. I think the bigger story that comes out of this is another failed cornerback draft. I mean, the Texans take Lonnie Johnson hoping he's going to be their next shutdown corner, and they still have – it's such a weakness of this team on the outside. There was hopes for me anyway this year that Lonnie Johnson takes that next step and maybe cornerback starts to be tightened up a little bit. But now you're stuck with Bradley Roby, who I don't know if he'll be able to stay healthy. And when he does, I mean, he's good. I don't know if he's good enough to be your number one. And Garyon Conley, who I also don't think is really good enough to be an every down guy. So while the move to safety, maybe it does help in week one against Kelce. I mean, it's got to be better than what they threw out there last year. But it does seem a little bit disappointing to me that that's the case.
Yeah, it seems like John Reed is getting a lot of play. You know, that's a rookie, though, and we'll see how that goes. But at least they look like it. You know, and you know how camp goes. They're always saying that this guy or that guy is looking really good. But listen, A.J. Bouye did a wonderful job. Not a big guy. You remember a few years ago when the Chiefs started the season here, the first game of the season, A.J. Bouye was just tremendous against Travis Kelce. You don't have to be a big guy. You just got to be good at covering. But John Harris says that there's a chance that the Texans are playing 7 DBs. You're going to have to be bigger guys then. You're going to have Lonnie Johnson, A.J. Moore. You're going to have Eric Murray on the field because you're going to have to tackle when they run the football. And if you can't tackle, then guess what? They're going to run all over you if they don't pass on you.
Yeah, when you talk about playing 7 DBs, you're essentially talking about guys who are sort of safety hybrid linebackers. And Lonnie Johnson is probably a guy who is maybe molded to fit that. How many of those guys do they have? I don't really know. And then do you open yourself up against the pass if that's the case? If you've got more big bodies out there, are they going to take advantage of safeties over the top? I think it's going to be tough. I shouldn't poo-poo it yet. I do think that until we see it, my initial reaction is it just seems like they don't really have the personnel on this team to do what it sounds like they want to do. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something going on at camp that I just haven't seen. But it doesn't. Knowing what I know about these bodies, it doesn't seem like a great fit.
Well, and if you're going to have 7 DBs on the field, then you better get a pass rush. I mean, Whitney Merciless has got – I saw the article in the Chronicle today that he's got to be his usual disruptive self. No, he's got to be much better than his usual self. He's got to be a lot better than his usual self. Listen, I think Jacob Martin, he's got to be on the field because he's going to give you a pass rush from the outside. He looked great at the end of the season. J.J. Watt, we'll see how healthy he is, but obviously that's another spot. But if you don't have a pass rush, I don't care what kind of DBs you got, and especially these DBs, they're going to get torched, and especially against Pat Mahomes.
Well, and you mentioned J.J. Watt being healthy. It hasn't happened lately, but it's a priority. If that's the style of defense you're planning on playing, he 100% has to be one of those other 5 non-DBs because – if he's not out there and he's not his usual self when he's on the field, there's really no hope for this defense. That won't work. So I think everything linchpins with him. I liked a little bit of what I saw out of Jacob Martin, but I've seen him in bursts, which tells me he's probably not a great pass rusher. He's a guy who can occasionally get some pressure, which is what you expected him to be. So asking him to be much more than that is a little ridiculous. I do think Whitney Merciless. He actually has to earn his money this year. And so far, since they've given that dude money, he's not earned it. And that's something that has to change. All the talk about, we can't afford to pay Jadeveon Clowney, and then you give that money to Whitney Merciless, that means Whitney Merciless has to be the guy. And so far, he just hasn't even looked remotely close to the guy.
No, and Jacob Martin is a guy who was a throw-in in the Clowney trade. And I, honestly, if you put a gun to my head and said who's going to have more sacks this year, Jacob Martin or Whitney Merciless, I'm going to go with Jacob Martin. Because I just don't trust Whitney Merciless. He had 12-sack year, but other than that, it's 7.5, 4, 1. He's been so wildly inconsistent. Last year, he started great. He's got a couple of sacks in a game, and he goes 9 weeks with a half a sack, and then he picks up a couple at the end of the year for 7.5 for the total. That's not being disruptive. You got to get a pass rush. I could certainly see a scenario though where you've got Whitney Merciless and Jacob Martin on one side. You got JJ also pass rushing somewhere inside. You got Zach Cunningham on the field, and you got 7 DBs against the Chiefs. That could absolutely happen because how are you going to stop Tyreek Hill? How are you going to stop Kelce? How are you going to stop? I'm telling you, Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield is going to be a monster. They have got to do something to slow this pass down and still get to Pat Mahomes.
Well, my guess is that's what literally everybody's game plan was last year. It's a lot easier said than done, especially if you don't have the right personnel, which, as we discussed, the names that you said right now doesn't make me feel good about stopping Patrick Mahomes.
There's nothing that makes me feel good about that first week in Kansas City.